Okay, I'd like to call this meeting to order with a moment of reflection, please. Okay, I'd like to begin the meeting as usual by recognizing the First Nations, the Métis and Inuit peoples of Canada as the traditional stewards of the land. The municipality is located within the boundary of Treaty 18 region of 1818, which is the traditional land of the Anishinaabe, Haudenosaunee, and Wyandot peoples. Okay, we're all fairly familiar with the various teleconference procedures, so we know what to do. You have received an agenda, actually a revised, updated agenda. Are there any additions to the agenda?
I have two.
Yes, Sabrina.
The first one that I have is that we have a guest who will be with us if we have questions having to do with F4.1. So I was hoping that we could move the discussion about the Ellie Shore Building Conditions Assessment Report and lowering the story tower up to the beginning of section F.
I don't see any problem with that. I've made a note of it.
Thank you. And then I have one additional addition, which would become F.4.2, which is having to do with an update and requested resolution about the leisure activity plan.
And yes, I have that. That confused me for a minute, but I got that in the right spot now. Okay, we got those. I've got those, and I'll try and keep everything straight. And if not, Sabrina will tell me anyway. Okay, hearing no additions to the agenda, I'd like someone to move that the agenda of May the 20th be approved as circulated, including those items added to the agenda. Someone to move it?
I'll move.
Rob and seconder?
Joanne?
Joanne, yeah. All in favor?
Yes.
Yes.
Anyone
Yes.
against? Carried. Do any of the board members have any pecuniary interest? Anything to declare? Hearing nothing, we will move on. Good to see Jesse has joined us. That's good. Thank you, Jesse.
Thank you.
Moving on to item number C. We have, as you can see in the agenda, we have 7 reports duly noted, and I'd like someone to move that this board receive as information all those reports, items number 1 to 7. Someone to move it?
Joanne?
Seconder? Sorry,
Gary.
did I hear a seconder?
Gary?
Sorry.
Harry.
Yeah, thank you, Gary. Sabrina hasn't got you on the screen. Maybe she's got the.
My video is a little
If
crazy.
you click on the square looking dots or gallery, depending on what view you're in.
Oh yeah, view options. Here we are.
And if you're on gallery, then you'll see everyone.
Well, that's not the right thing.
No.
Not the right click on. Share screens.
No.
Nope.
If you hit gallery view in the upper right, you should see everybody. Though my screen only holds 5 people at a time. So I have up and down arrows to scroll down to see others.
Right, depending on what size your screen is at, you'll see as many as your screen can handle.
My gallery is covered by the agenda.
Okay.
And mine is covered. That's what I was looking for. Thank you.
There you
Yeah,
go.
now I can see people. Where were we? Gary, I think, did you second or move it?
Second.
You say, So there is a motion on the floor. All in favor? That looks carried. Moving on. On to item D, the minutes. First of all, the previous minutes, the minutes of the various meetings beforehand. You've all read those minutes, I assume. Are there any errors or additions? Yes,
I
Lori?
think I jotted down there was a motion last meeting appointing me to serve on the working group for strategic plan, but I didn't spot it in the minutes. And I wrote down it was page 19 of the agenda package. But it may not matter because we have that whole discussion coming up again anyway today. So I'm not concerned if it doesn't appear.
Was
And I
it,
had a very minor comment. It looks like we adjourned twice on one of the meetings, once at 3:44 and once at a different time.
don't blame that on me.
Okay, sure, happy to.
There was the adjourning at 3:44 from the closed session into the open session.
Ah,
But there was also an H section below that that said the whole meeting adjourned. Did I misread it? I can't get it on my screen now because we're opening the meeting.
Note, we have two conflicting times. I will go back and look at our notes.
Okay.
Okay, with this minor changes, adjustments that Sabrina will fix up. Were those the only errors or additions that I hear? May I have someone move that this board approve as circulate? Now, excuse me, let me backtrack. We are talking the minutes of three meetings, the March 18th and April 15th open board meetings and the closed board meetings of April the 15th. So when we're saying these minutes. So the motion is, the recommended motion that people have made is that this board approve as circulated the minutes of the March 18th, 2021 and April 15th, 2021 board meetings, and also to approve as circulated the minutes of the closed meeting of April the 15th, 2021. That is the motion. Are everyone in favor?
Do we have a mover and seconder yet?
Not yet.
Oh, I
I'm
beg your
happy to
pardon.
move.
Well, Laurie has moved it. I need a seconder.
Gary,
Gary, thank you. All in favor? That's carried.
I didn't note any business arising from the minutes outside of what's already on the agenda as standing items,
Okay,
unless
thank
there
you,
were
Sabrina.
questions or comments.
I was just looking at that. Now we're moving on to item E. Do we we haven't had any deputation requests?
No.
No deputation. What about public input? Well, there's nobody here, so there won't be any of that. Now, correspondence. Sabrina, would you mind just, well, I'll briefly mention those. Oh, very nice letters. Go ahead.
I will pull these up for you. We had a number of correspondence that came through having to do with the Wired Wednesday and our various types of programs that we've been doing. So each of the people involved did say that they were welcoming us to put these up onto our board package for public consumption as well. And it's just nice to see the different ways that these types of programs have been embraced by our public, and also the type of impact that it's making on their lives. Certainly, we all know with COVID, we've had to find other ways of doing things, but our numbers have really gone up on our programming, especially with Wired Wednesday. If you remember correctly, when we were doing Wired Wednesday before, It was a tech help program that was on the Wednesday on site, and it was in the boardroom, so you could never have more than 10 people. Now we have hundreds of views in a month, so that's a fantastic improvement.
Questions of Sabrina on those?
The only thing that's crossing my mind is post-COVID, are you going to continue the online version since it seems to be so popular and double up with an in-person one, or what?
That's one of the things that we're looking at now is how to move forward in 22 as we start seeing where restrictions are. Certainly we want to bring some programs back into a face-to-face, but I think that we're going to be having a very new model of services that'll end up being a hybrid. Just given how many people are interested in this type of online platform. The same thing with our story times with children being able to watch it before bed as opposed to being out of school, or a parent being available to come in during the day. So I think that we have a lot of programs that will be shifting into much more of a hybridized new format.
Mm-hmm.
Just means it's twice the work.
Yeah.
I think it's quite a challenge.
It's interesting. Do we know, maybe it's, I don't know. I was curious, like, is this something that I should clue into?
The great thing about our Wired Wednesday, I think everybody should take a look at them.
Yeah.
Our Wired Wednesdays have different topics each week. We
Yeah.
record all of them and we also put them on YouTube. So if you haven't had a chance to watch it when it was streaming live on Facebook and you want to ask a question through the Facebook platform, you can always go back and watch it on YouTube as well. So many people have called us recently saying they want to place a hold on a book, or they want to use Libby because they're looking now more for online resources that they maybe weren't as interested in a year ago when we first started doing our online tutorials through Wired Wednesday. And we can certainly answer some questions over the phone, but we also bring it right back to the YouTube page where they can click on it and watch things that we've already been through.
I was thinking more along the lines of, is it something I should do rather than talk to my grandson?
You should
I
ask
can't
your
help you.
grandson that.
What?
You should ask your grandson that.
I would hate to hear his
In
reply.
that case, Mr. Chair, I would say that Ashley is everybody's granddaughter.
Okay, I'll leave that subject. I'd like someone to
We
move that
don't
this-
judge, unlike your grandchildren.
Would someone care to move that this board receive the correspondence that we've just received, receive it as
So
information?
moved.
Jesse, seconder, Joanne, all in favor? Carried. Now, this is the item well, hang on, we're going to, right to the beginning now. We're bringing up the item that you have listed as F4.1.
That's correct. We'll take this one out of order in
Yeah.
case there's questions of one of the town staff members who is with us. So this item, if I may, Mr. Chair,
I was
is
going to ask you, Go ahead.
falling under our Vibrant Spaces 3.1 action plan, and it is having to do with the Ellie Shore Building Conditions Assessment Report recommendations that we're continuously working with the town to try to implement aspects of that. One of the ongoing issues that we've had is sort of the design flaw of having barreled roofs with flat roofs with cylinder shapes that cut into roofs that of course are a continuous leaking problem. As you know, that we've had significant work done on the roofs over the past few years, but we still continue to have various leaks, which is an issue because we get into mold and mildew. We've seen what's happened with the depot when things are not jumped on as quickly as they should. And in consultation with the town's maintenance crew and the finance new staff member, Phil, who is responsible for working with maintenance on budgets, one of the things that we discussed was if we were to lower the height of the story tower, it would not impact the actual story tower usage. It would bring it down about 10 feet. It would then have the ability to be tied into the main roof line. which would stop all of the water that is continuously pouring in. The storm that we had about 3 weeks ago was one that Phil, again, as a new manager, was able to see firsthand, and it was a waterfall coming down the inside of the story tower. Depending on the way the water runs and the wind blows, it's just a circle that you're trying to tie into a flat roof, which of course is always going to have shifting and leaking and animals and other things like that that will dig into it. So if we were to move forward with that, I've worked with the town to see what the price points would be, and that would be a budget then that he would present to council. What we would be doing now is making a recommendation that we approve this as, again, stewards of the building. That's a best practice. The town would then be responsible for taking the action. One of the other things that I asked at that time, which has been something that's been on both our accessibility plan and our vibrant spaces plan, is for the floor of the story tower also to be brought up, because we have the issue with the 2 stairs. We have children who can't make it down, parents with strollers who can't make it down, grandparents who want to come in for story time with children can't make it down. So this is something that would be done at the same time. Again, it wouldn't impact the overall feel. We would simply be raising the floor so it's level with the main floor. So when you come in, the seats would be raised slightly, so you still have that great feel of being able to sit on the floor with children, sit on seats, have your story time. It would still have an elevated ceiling. It just wouldn't be a 2-story elevated ceiling. It would be about 1.5 stories. And then that would be tied in with our main roof. And we believe that will take care of all of our ongoing sort of design issues with barreled roofs, cylindrical rooms, all trying to tie in.
Thank you, Sabrina. That's a good explanation. Does anyone have any questions of Sabrina about this, the physical part of this thing? No? No? I have.
I
Go
do
ahead.
have one,
Ed,
and
go ahead.
that we may need to do a little communications preparation because the story tower has always been one of the most well-loved parts of the library. And, you know, we may face a little backlash from the community, even though this is necessary and it's a matter of public health. People always assume that there might have been a better way, no matter what you do. So, you know, we aren't going to convince everybody. We know that, but just to make sure that we cover it. So I'm assuming there'd be a communications plan before
Yes.
before everything hits the fan, so to speak.
Most definitely. There's a few things that we have sort of as a draft outline moving forward. The town and I would be working very closely together to make sure that there is an awareness campaign of what we're doing, why we're doing it, and exactly what the facade will look like when it's done, so that there are no surprises on that end. We're also working with their Craigleith Heritage Depot to make sure that we're documenting it, so that, like all of our local history aspects, we try to document any major changes in our own buildings and into town buildings, so that it's part of our collection. Beyond that, we would be making sure that our community is aware, not just why we're doing it, but how it's going to be used in the future. So we've heard through our 2018 community consultation that there's 2 things that they did not want touched: the windows, the story seats in the windows, and the story tower. I don't see this as a changing of the story tower, like taking it away. It really is an improvement piece. I understand that it will change a bit of the facade of the front of the building, because the story tower would no longer be above the barreled roofs. But when you're in the story tower, you would still have that feeling of being in that large space. So it is something that we have worked with the town to make sure that the design still represents that important feeling that people get with the story tower. It will just have a slightly different look from the outside.
This is one of those times when we could use those champions that we've talked about before.
Yes, Joanne, you had something to say?
Not directly related, but I'm still concerned about the condition of our bathrooms. And
We're a little off topic there, Joanne. Can we come back to that?
I don't know when.
There will be time, Joanne. I'm sure you can make it.
I have been, if Mr. Chair, I can respond as a sort of wrap up to that piece, though, that I have been working very closely with this new manager, and we have gone through all of the aspects of the condition report. We have spoken specifically about the big need for Ellie Shore, which is the bathrooms. We're all in agreement that we're putting something off on those bathrooms being repaired with the assumption that an addition and expansion is coming, and we don't want to toss money into an area that won't meet AODA only to rip it down later. But that if the expansion doesn't happen in short period, we do have to do that because they're not functional.
Thank you.
That this will be, I think, one of our biggest pieces for the year, that and addressing our windows. That are two major issues where we're dealing with water damage, mildew buildup, and the possibility of mold. So those are the two things that we've really focused on for this year.
Thank you, Sabrina. And score one for Joanne. Yes, Laurie?
Just in terms of that communication plan, I think one of the concerns with the floor of the story tower is AODA compliance and the difficulty of dealing with the different levels. So I think that might be addressed as part of your comp plan as well.
Yes.
Well, before we get to a communications plan, there has to be a council approval of this. Am I not correct?
Certainly. We do want to make sure, though, that we have thought, like, this is the first time that this conversation actually has been made public. There will be a report going to council. We will then be working together to make sure that it's understood why we're doing this, so that people aren't getting upset before they hear why we're doing something.
Now,
So yes, we will be doing it in tandem.
I've just got one small question. Why are we going directly to council as opposed to going through staff?
There is no budget for this. This is not something that was put into a budget. It is part of the larger repairs, but this item was not put into the budget for 2021. And
Which
after
budget?
the
Our budget
past,
or their budget?
into the
budget.
town's budget. And with the past two big rainstorms, we saw significant water coming into the building. So these have been sped up. Now that there is a new manager looking at our facility conditions and realizing that these are two big issues that we can't wait another year to wait for the budget process to go through, because by that point we could have more water damage, more mildew or mold buildup or something like that.
Yeah.
So it's been streamlined because of that.
But in my small experience, stuff that somehow gets directed to council gets shuffled off to staff for their recommendations.
This will actually be coming through as a recommendation by the town staff, not by us. We're just making sure that when it comes through as the town staff putting this report together, that there is an understanding that we're on board with this, because otherwise what happens is council will ask the question of, well, where is the library on this stance, which then puts everything going backwards and slowing down. So this recommendation would be part of the report that will go by the town staff to council.
Thank you. Jesse, you have
Yeah, Sabrina, has the exact cause of the water ingress been identified clearly?
It has, and it really is a design flaw of the building. It's been an ongoing issue. It is a case of trying to fit a round peg into a square hole. And you know, that's just where it is. It's been an issue. We've had many issues with water on this building from the beginning. We now have council, town staff who are really helping us to identify where some of these issues are. We could do another Band-Aid repair, but it would be another few years before we'd be back to making the same Band-Aid repairs. They've been
This
doing.
sounds to me, it's almost in the area of a capital expenditure as opposed to a budget item.
It is a capital expenditure. It would be on the town's line, We're just trying to support the request that the town's staff would like to put forward to council.
Okay. Thank you.
And the staff, Phil Pazek, will put this forward.
Phil is with us. I'm not sure if Phil has anything to add.
Hi, Phil.
Hi, guys. I know Sabrina did an excellent job explaining the situation. There is a warranty piece to this project that because of one issue or another wasn't met. And when we were reviewing the options to meet warranty, we found that you know, a simple fix, as Sabrina said, would just push off another repair and another repair. And our effort is to maintain the building in its best condition for the longest period of time. And in support of that, we identified a number of options. And the best option was to lower the height of the story tower and maintain one uniform piece of flat roof that's tied in together. Ultimately, it might cost a little bit more to do the demolition and creating the flat roof, but long term, it'll save a substantial amount of money because it'll maintain the longevity of the building.
Thank you, Phil. Now, you will be presenting this to council.
Of course. And as Sabrina said, this is the initial conversation where we just make sure there's an understanding of how we are approaching the problem. And then once we have the agreement, I will bring it forward to council as an option.
So really, Sabrina, your recommendation, which I'm endorsing, of course, but your recommendation is recommend this whole subject to council directly. And with their left hand, they'll read that. With their right hand, they'll read Phil's presentation and the reasons for doing it.
Yes, so this recommendation that I put in front of you today would be provided then to go to Phil to include in his report that we are behind this process, and that we would also be looking at the various communication needs as partners on this project.
Thank you. Okay. Does anyone have any other questions for Sabrina and or Phil directly, if you wish? Laurie?
Just given that we're talking about a flat roof and the whole question of the dome being a popular architectural element, did you address a version that includes some way of an appearance of a dome, even if there's a flat roof underneath it?
I can handle that one. The barreled roof is not being changed. So the two barrel roofs come up like this, and there's a section in the middle that's flat. So that will just be the piece that we're addressing. We will still have the barreled roofs. I know that is, whether we all like them or not, it is a major design of the building, and we've just invested close to $500,000 on replacing those barreled roofs in the past 2 years. That's not being addressed. It's the flat center in the middle where we're having the problems with the leak because of the way it's tied into a round angled cylinder. It's on a cone.
Thanks, Sabrina. Any other questions? Hearing none, I will now move, pardon me, I will now read the recommendation that is in front of you. And I would like someone to actually make it as a motion. In fact, why don't we do it this way? I as chair move that this board as stewards of the Ellie Shore facility recommend to the Town of Blue Mountains Council to consider the story tower roof replacement project with the reduced roof line in order to repair ongoing water issues and permanently remediate design flaws. May I have a seconder?
I'd like to second that, Mr. Chair.
Thanks, Rob.
Rob,
Question?
Yes, sorry. Yes, sorry. I
Me
wasn't
again.
rushing you.
I just didn't want you to call the question. My hand will be misunderstood. Only to ask, there was a reference to raising the floor at the same time. Does that need to be mentioned in the motion?
We can certainly add that.
Yeah, you can add something. Do you want, what words would you put in, Sabrina?
Following the design flaws, I would say, and that the story tower floor be raised to meet AODA access.
Everyone happy with that? I'm happy with that addition. We're the Rob, yep. Any other questions?
But just one, it may not be relevant, but Sabrina, how old is that building?
1994. We opened in 1995.
So it's
So
about
25
20,
years. 26
25,
years.
20.
Ready
Okay,
for the question? All in favor? Anyone against? Carried. Why are you laughing, Jesse?
sorry, oh, you gave such a sigh of relief.
It wasn't a big sigh. You haven't heard anything yet. All right, moving on. Where am I now?
Thank you, Phil.
Thank you.
Oh, thank you, Phil.
Bye, guys.
I guess, Sabrina, you still have the floor, and all I can say is we've got a lot of things coming up with recommendations coming in there. That's what I might step in, but stay with one item at a time if you can. Otherwise, I'll lose track of where we are. So you have the floor. We're on F1. Correct?
Yes.
Good.
Okay, so our next report is the action plan report. We are on track. We are now towards the end of the 5th month. We have achieved a little bit over almost 33%, and we continue to be making progress. A few items that I just wanted to note on here, and then certainly if anybody has questions specific, I can take those as well. We continue to note where our numbers are. You'll see that C1.4 Instagram, we've surpassed the number. So it's technically complete, but we'll continue to tell you where our numbers are. And then we've added a new item, although it is not included in the numbering since it wasn't a part of the approved action plan early on, and that is C1.6. And that was to add in a new social media LinkedIn. So our purpose for having LinkedIn is to really push a lot of our online resources and professional development materials. It really is the #1 social media for professional development and professional use. So we thought that was a good product to use in the So I've added that one on, and I'm not sure if there were any other questions specifically that anyone has about items, and you'll see many of them are on our agenda today.
Okay, does anyone have any thoughts or questions on the action plan items? Maybe not, Sabrina. Maybe we can move on now to what? Where am I? 2.2?
Certainly. So our LinkedIn, I did just mention, we just wanted to promote that one more time, that we are doing that. We have small users at this point, but we've only been promoting this for about 2 or 3 weeks. So those numbers will continue to grow. F2.2, our action item C1.5, is to publish an annual direct newsletter. So I've brought questions forward to the board. Typically, we've done this, well, this is our 2nd year. Last year, we did it in the summer, and we did it directly after the year in review. So my question is, do we want to do it as part of the year in review? Or my personal recommendation would be to hold off and do this instead of in the early summer, to do this maybe in the early fall when we're knee deep in the part of doing our strategic plan community consultation, where we could be promoting specific dates. So I would say we need to know when the board would like to do this, what's the main topic, and then who's going to be involved.
Well, you're springing something new on there, aren't you, Sabrina? Could you just go back to your thinking on the timing of this newsletter?
Certainly. So last year we did it in the early summer, and we used it as a way of promoting our year in review, so our statistics. we have some really big things that are coming up in the fall, which we'll be doing our focus groups, doing our post-it note activity where people can come in and make individual comments on the various areas of our strategic plan. We'll be doing some one-on-one interviews, additional surveys. We'll have additional virtual town halls where people can give direct feedback. And to me, that makes more sense to use that as how we can promote some of those pieces. So I would think that the best use of a print newsletter that does cost us some money to print and distribute would be to use that directly as part of our promotional phase of the community consultation for the strategic plan. That would put this in probably a September, either the September 1st newsletter or an October 1st newsletter, depending on where our timelines end up being in the community consultation phase. I think it's a better use of our budget and our time drafting this.
Okay, I have a thought. It's really what I wrote down here when I was going over this. My thought would be to leave this information newsletter, leave it to the fall. You mentioned September, whatever the date is. I had October, November, but whatever you wish. But leave it until this shutdown is over or effectively over. That's one thing. Otherwise, if we do it even in June or whatever, we'll still be talking about shutdown things.
Mhm.
That's my opinion. And then if we do leave it till later in the year, my suggestion is rather than, if you like, spend money and publish it through whatever media we do, why not just make it have a special report from you to the board that obviously becomes public then? I'm only throwing it on the floor as a possible suggestion. Anyone got any thoughts on the whole subject?
I
Gary?
have some comments, Mr. Chair. I think the fall is a better use of resource for sure. I think we'll have a lot more information with probably October-ish, late October, maybe at the latest. And so if we want to do it as a print media, that's maybe where it's a little different than you were just suggesting. I think using the
else?
strat plan makes sense.
Yep. Anyone else? Lori?
I think the point of doing a print newsletter is to get to some of the members of the community that aren't typically involved in virtual or online stuff. There's probably a smaller percentage than there has been in the past, but I think that's the advantage. And of course, we're getting it out to them. And I believe it also goes to non-resident property owners that are not necessarily physically up here. So I think there's a value in doing a print item. And I do think it makes sense to do strat planning focused because that's probably our biggest activity over the next number of months into the fall. And my only concern is timing is, it can be any time sort of summer to fall, so long as it fits best with whatever we're trying to promote in terms of the strat planning. And I would leave that to Sabrina to decide what's the best timing.
Yeah, I'm with you. Yeah. Anyone else? Any thoughts? Any other thoughts? Is this something we can decide on a consensus basis, Sabrina?
Certainly, I think the discussion was enough from that end. It's just that on our action plan, we do have it being a certain date. So if we're going to push it, which I agree, rightly so, we should push it to align with our strategic plan. I just wanted to bring it forward. So I think the discussion that we've had is plenty.
And the discussion seems to me to say we leave it to the, let's say, October date for want of a better time, and continue with the hard copy letter type thing that you're talking about, not the other way I suggested. Everyone okay with that? Just raise your hand.
Yes.
That says yes. There you go, Sabrina. Okay, moving on.
Just a note, we do have an item that we're making committee of the whole presentations quarterly. We are going to be making a committee of the whole presentation specifically on the year in review, and that will be on June 1st. So if you are interested in watching on the streaming live, certainly that's when it'll be. And it will be a deputation, so that'll be how it aligns in their schedule.
And go ahead, Lori.
Are you showing the video? Is that what you're doing?
Yes. So we're going to show the video. I mean, it's a 10 to 15 minutes. So it'll mostly be showing the video and asking any questions, answering questions that they have of us, but just to make sure that the annual report has been presented to council.
And who will be involved in that presentation? Who do you think should be involved?
Certainly, if there's any members of the board who would like to participate in addition to myself, I will work out getting the login and letting the clerk know.
You can add my name to there, Sabrina. That June 1st date,
Yes.
not a golf day. That's
It
a
won't be
private
yet.
joke.
You have to wait a whole nother day before they open up the golf courses.
Where are we now? Are you moving on to item C, the action item C 2.6?
F2.4 is the virtual town hall.
Yeah, sorry, yeah.
And we may want to just defer this conversation until we have the report from the working group that did the proposed plan for the strategic plan, because I see that the virtual town hall, the next one, will be presenting the year in review and kicking off some discussions on the community consultation. And then the second one will actually be right in the middle of the community consultation. So I see the virtual town halls for spring and fall time directly into that. So maybe we can hold off on picking those dates until after we hear the report.
Okay, you've still got the floor.
So we'll hold off on that recommendation, and that is the annual report. So I have circulated two versions of our year in review. The first was what was sent out to you earlier in the week. And then actually earlier today was an updated version based on some comments. The original version had the video, which hasn't changed. And the new version has some pop-ups of some statistics that are in there. So I'm not sure if the board has had a chance to see both of them. We certainly can watch both of them. They're each 10 minutes, or we can watch the one without the pop-up statistics and then watch just a portion where the statistics come up so you can see what the difference is. So we don't spend 20 minutes on the viewing.
Any
Does that work
preferences
for you,
with
Mr.
anyone?
Chair?
I'd be in favor of watching the one with the pop-up.
You'd watch the pop-ups instead? Okay.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay, so we'll watch the most recent version, which is our statistics pop-ups in full, and we'll just get that started for you. Welcome to the Blue Mountains Public Library 2020 Year in Review. This year, the board opted to create a video snapshot of our year instead of a traditional report. The Blue Mountains Public Library, like all of the town's community services, worked hard to provide a seamless service model in 2020, despite the pandemic and the various provincial lockdowns. We began the year with one of our facilities closed due to radon contamination and another working overtime to serve the needs of the whole of the Blue Mountains community. Our Craigleith Heritage Depot was remediated and cleared for safe entry just in time for the pandemic lockdowns.
Staff took the opportunity to reorganize the museum collections and storage areas during this period, installing environmental monitoring technology to ensure a safe building for staff and for our guests. Thanks to the town capital funding, the storage in the museum was shifted to high-index mobile shelving, which more than tripled the available storage space for the Craigleith Heritage Depot. When the province allowed for libraries to reopen in the spring of 2020, the staff worked closely with the Grey Bruce Health Unit to develop standards and practices which would surpass public health requirements. Everyone who enters the library will be required to wear a mask or face covering, and only 15 people will be able to enter at any one time. A staff at the monitoring station will greet you and complete contact tracing when you're here. This confidential information will be retained for 30 days and only shared with the Grey Bruce Health Unit if required. We developed sanitizing procedures, and we contact traced prior to this even being a requirement. And throughout the whole time, we kept abreast of scientific studies and their recommendations for library material decontamination. Also during this time, the staff transitioned the service model by moving all displays into our windows, assisting the community to visually browse while lockdowns were in place. Programs were moved outside, such as our weekly story time that ran from the spring thaw right through the snowfall. And of course, staff moved all regular programs into virtual formats.
Hello, and welcome to another wonderful Wired Wednesday.
Was the night before Christmas, when all through the house, not a creature was stirring, not even a mouse.
Let's roll the shoulders up and back. Let's make Blue Mountains history together.
See you next time, friends. Bye.
In 2019, there were 726 programs with 16,108 attendees. While we held only 450 programs in 2020, our participation increased by an additional 64%, with 26,465 logins. That's an increase of over 10,000. And, as we have seen, many families who participated in our variety of online programs did not watch alone. So these actual numbers are expected to have been compounded. Our gallery continued with monthly exhibits, but due to physical distancing and intermittent closures, the Arts and Culture Council moved these exhibits online as well as into the physical gallery. The ACC also began virtual programming for their speaker series, the ACC Presents. This saw a huge reach targeting those who may not have previously come in for in-person presentations. We also saw an increase in numbers throughout this programming. The Craigleith Heritage Depot was able to hold a highly successful outdoor event celebrating our military heritage at the Clarksburg Legion in September of 2020. Our Military Heritage is a series of online exhibits involving the people of the town of the Blue Mountains in the 19th century, First World War, Second World War, peacekeeping, and military heritage resources. This collection was created with financial support from the Veterans Affairs Canada's Commemorative Partnership Program's Community Engagement Funding. Additionally, our museum's team worked on the development of the two newest films in the Real History series, Fossils and the Niagara Escarpment. In early 2020, this series was celebrated with two additional provincial awards. The first, the Award for Excellence from the Ontario Museum Association, and the second, the Minister's Award for Innovation from the Ministry of Heritage, Sport, Tourism, and Culture Industries. Congratulations to our staff and partner, the Mountain Goat Film Team, on the completion of the 4th and 5th films in these series. In the summer, the Blue Mountains Public Library developed a curbside pickup, which ensured safety of our community. The fall lockdown took on a different style of curbside as more was known about the virus. While we had access into the building in the fall of 2020, we continued to place safety measures at the forefront of all of our GLAM services. While our total usage was down for physical materials, our virtual and e-resource materials were increased, as were our total card holders. Our board, committees, and the Arts and Culture Council worked throughout the pandemic virtually to assure governance and advisory functions continued to be achieved. Several communication strategies were developed in 2020, in part based on the strategic goals and the action plan, and others were in response to the global pandemic.
I'd like to welcome everybody to our virtual town hall. This is our first town hall meeting. We're planning 3 this year, but our first is virtual for the obvious reason of the pandemic.
Our goal of these sessions was not only to present updates, but to hear from our community. So in this, we were as successful as we could be in a year of COVID-19. In response to the ever-changing conditions during the lockdowns and reopening, we established a new page on the website entitled Service Updates and COVID-19. Through this page, we updated our community on the ongoing changes in operating hours and access, as well as how we were adjusting the service model to best provide excellence in service. Additionally, we began our annual mailed newsletter, which in 2020, we partnered with the Blue Mountains Review. This governance newsletter was in addition to the monthly e-newsletters and focused on the activities and plans of the board. As a governance body, the board produced another extensive action plan for 2020. Early in the pandemic, this plan was reviewed and some items were pushed post-pandemic, but 86 items were retained and all but 3 were successfully implemented. Being at the end of the halfway point of the 2018-2022 board and its strategic plan, the board has focused on achieving 3 of the 4 goals, while shifting emphasis of vibrant spaces to the retrofit and improvement of our current facilities. The Blue Mountains Public Library GLAM participated with the town's consultants on the leisure activity plan study, which will inform the master facilities plan later in 2021. Once these documents have been completed, a better understanding of the town's strategic planning around community hubs, especially in the Craigleaf area, will be completed, and then the board will revisit the 4th strategic plan goal of vibrant spaces, specific to expansion. To be a solution maker for our community, the library partnered on 2 events, the Trick or Treat drive-through and the Veterans Day Services live stream. As we realized our community's youth were being recommended not to trick or treat door to door for safety reasons, we requested community members to drop off the candy they would have otherwise bought for their home. We had 85 families, businesses, and organizations donate more than 10,000 pieces of candy and bags of chips, and 65 cars with over 250 ghosts, goblins, and witches were safely able to participate in our trick-or-treat drive-through. Similarly, when we heard that participation in the Remembrance Day services was requiring to have a limited gathering, we partnered with our Royal Canadian Legion Branch 281 and the town to live stream the event. This was offered on the library's YouTube as well as the town's live stream service. And of course, in finale, without fanfare or celebration, we celebrated our 25th anniversary in December of 2020. Even throughout the very difficult year of 2020, our board and its committees were able to continue to provide governance, and the staff provided excellence in service to our community. We rose to each challenge put before our Blue Mountains Public Library team, and the feedback from our partners and our patrons have demonstrated that we are on the right track. We look forward to learning from our successes and our challenges in 2020 as we work through the 2021 year.
So there's a few statistics that'll still be coming in. You saw those in red saying fill in here. And then at the end will also be the links back once it's posted as the final on Facebook. We'll be able to make those two blue boxes at the end. Other than that, I don't know if there were any other feedback or comments on the actual document. We'll have a letter that goes with that, which was circulated to the board, and we can put that up now as a shared screen. And the first page is the letter. There's obviously a few holes of saying when things are happening that would be on there. And then the second page is a snapshot of the various statistics. And then that would be attached with the e-newsletter blast that we would put out as with the link to the video as soon as it's done, as soon as it's approved. And the video on the live stream, so it's a video being played from YouTube onto Zoom and then onto Facebook right now. So the quality that we saw just now is definitely not the same quality as if you go to the YouTube page. It's a much more professional grade finish.
Okay, that's great, Sabrina. I guess all you need now, or we need now, is a motion to approve the release of this video and the letter. Is that? Do you think that's right?
That's correct, unless there were any edits or additional comments of things you wanted done to it.
Well, I think we've. Well, I don't know. Are there any things other things you'd like done to it?
One tiny thing.
Oh,
On the
yes,
very
Laurie.
last screen, you make a reference to visit our website for more statistics and maybe say, and to view the audited financial report.
It is, when it goes up there, it will have those two blue boxes, will have sort of the links to those. So we'll make sure that's on there.
Okay.
Yes, because we do want to make sure it's also our audited financials, and that is also on the bottom of the statistics page as well.
Okay, thank you.
Because you're correct, that is a key part of an annual report.
Gary?
I just had one question. The cutesy bronze statue at Ellie Shore with the face mask and everything, I think it's great. Do people know? A lot of people would know what it is, but is it identified by name at all? I just think maybe it should be worded.
We can put a caption under there, the bust of Leonard E. Shore.
Yeah. I think that.
Okay. Anyone else? Okay. I'd like someone to move that this board approve the release of the year in review 2020 video and statistics, and also to approve that a request for a deputation be made to council. Someone to move?
So move.
Gary? Seconder, Jesse? All in favor? Carried. Okay, now we can move on a little bit, Sabrina, I think.
Excellent, thank you. It was fun working on. It was really fun having people who had better skill sets than I did to do it. So,
Like who?
but I think it was a good product for our first major video report like that.
Did your daughter have a hand in it?
She did.
Good.
We had many who had a hand in it.
All right.
So our next process is, next item is the return on investment and social value report. I know this is something that keeps coming back on when we're going to do it. So I wanted to bring this forward because it is a time commitment matter. We certainly can do it. Previously, the document was held by the Ontario Library Service North. I've been asking for them to redo this document for a number of years because it had a northern centric calculations. Now that the two OLSs have merged, it's taking on a much more provincial standpoint. And the OLS is going to redo that document, but they said it's not being done until the fall. So that could mean that it happens in 2021. It could mean it's released in 2022. So I wanted to put this to the board that if you would like us to move forward with doing this ROI study, it could be something then that we're presenting to the board and to council in about November. It would give us time to do it over the summer, crunch the report, bring it to the board here in probably September, October, and then use that as our late fall presentation to council. Or we can wait for OLS to actually do it It certainly won't take long for us to put the information in. It's that we have to do a full coding of the report because it needs to be edited from a northern version. So it's just a question of, is it something that the board strongly would like to see presented to council in 2021? Or are you okay if OLS takes longer and it becomes a piece that's put forward in early 2022?
Anyone? Jesse?
I'm wondering if Rob has any comment about the timing.
No, I think what Sabrina's suggesting, I don't think it's going to be that crucial. So, yeah, I think whatever you're thinking about either way would work.
Joanne?
I'm in favor of the OLS coming forth with a document and us playing off that. I'm quite impressed with the way they handled statistics and such in their early, rebirth.
Does, I hate to bring this up, but we can't lose sight of the shutdown thing this year. Is that going to affect the figures? Would it affect the figures? Would the figures be any more representative if we waited for until 2022?
Well, the 2022 would be on the 2021 statistics. At this point, the doing a report now would be on 2020, and we could go back a year for 2019 as well. So we have sort of a comparison between a previously normal year and a pandemic year. I don't know how much of the previous normal will continue to be a normal moving forward, but it's something that we could look at.
Yeah. Is this something we want to take a vote on? I mean, do we do it this year or wait until 2022?
I just brought it forward because the intention was that we were going to do this in 2019. The report at that point was in the hands of OLS North. They did not make the changes to the document. We started making the changes to the document. And then when the remediation issue happened, I put it aside and I didn't go back to it because it is probably about 60 or 70 hours worth of coding. Then 2020 happened and again, we didn't go back to it. So now we're into the middle of 21 and it feels like we keep deferring this item, which is an important part of being able to identify that we do have a strong return on investment to our community, both social and financial. So I am fine if the board would like us to do that, or if you are comfortable waiting another fiscal year to present this to council, then we just won't put the labor into it.
Joanne, your hand's up.
Who's 60 hours?
It would be our staff. So the document has already been done. It's a locked document that OLS North had that they no longer have the codes to unlock. And that's where the problem is. It was completed by the Rotman School on behalf of, commissioned by one of our OLSs. It's now that they can't open it. So that's why we were physically looking at the code line by line and re-entering code. I was about 30 hours in and was a little under halfway done. We can have one of our staff pick up doing that. It will be about 70 hours to have the document redone. And frankly, if we do it, we'll probably end up giving it to the OLS, which might actually get it released faster to the rest of our public libraries if we do it. At this point, we're waiting for them to have the time to go back and do this coding. And we've been waiting for a few years. And I know there's been a lot of issues, obviously, in our province with funding cuts. So, it's not that we're upset that it hasn't been done, but if we keep pushing and waiting, we might continue to wait for this document.
All right.
But
Sabrina,
now they have said that it is one of their priorities. But at this point, the OLS is only a 1-month-old organization. So, it's a priority, but I'm not sure where that falls in their overall work plan, they're hoping to have it started in the fall of 2021.
Sabrina, I'll be sort of blunt. What would you like us to do or to recommend or approve? Or
Certainly, if the board is not jumping, biting at the bit to get this presented to council, I would say we wait until the fall and see where they are. But if this is something that we want to just accomplish and present to council, then we should do it. I have a feeling that even if we wait, we may be doing it in the late fall ourselves anyways, just that, things happen, and this is not one of the main priorities for the province. It's been one of our priorities. So it may be a case that we end up having to do it anyways on our own, or waiting a year or two for it to actually materialize.
are you in fact suggesting we table this until, say, the September meeting?
We could do that.
Any thoughts?
I don't see any
Recommendation,
harm in
Gary?
waiting.
I'm sorry, Gary, what'd you say?
I don't see any harm in waiting.
Okay. Is that a recommendation? Is that a suggestion, a motion?
I would basically concur with Sabrina's approach. Yes. Could be a motion if you want, or just consensus.
Well, let's
We'll put
call it
this
a
on
motion.
our agenda, Mr. Chair, for September, and we can discuss then to see where the progress is.
Good idea.
Okay, so you don't, yeah, right. I see what you're doing. Yeah, okay. So are we through? We're all okay with that?
Yeah, if I could just add one quick thing, and that is that we don't want this to get buried. And so I think we want to try and be a little strategic so that we don't bring this up at the time that council is buried under budgets and all that kind of stuff. So I'm sure Sabrina's aware of that, but that would be my only concern.
Okay, let's look at it again in September. Okay?
Sounds good. Thank you.
Okay, now, the item number 7 on there. Sabrina, is that going to be you, Sabrina, or do you think Lori should?
So, Mr. Chair, we had 3 people who did work on this. Lori from the board, Mary Dodge, one of our staff, and myself. So I will pass this, if it's all right with you, to Lori, and certainly if there's questions of anyone of this team, it's available, unless Lori would prefer that one of us present it. I saw the look when I said that.
I don't mind starting, and you, of course, both of you, Sabrina and Mary, happy to jump in. I was asked by the board to work with Sabrina and Mary on laying out an overall plan for getting the strat plan going. And we had 2, maybe 3 meetings, which were actually very, very interesting. And Sabrina did a very good job of capturing a lot of the information. I thought the general discussion section was interesting because before I met with these guys, I wasn't entirely certain that we needed to do a new strategic plan because we had to shelve so much of the last one because of COVID, but also related to vibrant spaces. And the more we talked about, what has changed, or what did we miss the last time around, or what could we do better? We ended up identifying an awful lot of reasons why it is worthwhile doing a fulsome process again this time. And then, so we've laid out, instead of going backwards on you, poor Sabrina, but the proposed timeline with sort of an April to August time where we're doing the planning and community awareness, and something that we're calling the listening stage, which has come out of information from the Harwood Institute, which is a process that actually I believe ALA developed, American Library Association developed, and has been used in a number of libraries as a way of learning to listen to the community in different ways, I would say, to make sure that we're hearing the voices of groups that may not be using the library and may not be understanding the role the library could play in their lives. And so then that would be part of our early phase. Then we would go into the more traditional, sort of more formal aspects of consultation, focus groups and surveys. And what I thought was a very effective process last time, where we did our post-it note events, which gave us the quotes from the community that we actually included in our strat plan and made a clear line between what we had heard and what we decided to do. And then we have next spring a timeline where we're analyzing what we're hearing and getting some feedback. And that's when we came up with the thought that looking at the mission, vision, and values as a policy review item this year was out of step with our planning process. And while we can make maybe some minor adjustments, we would want to come back to those once we've done most of our consultation process for a new plan. And then we will be writing the formal plan next May or so, and for approval in June. Now, there's some information in here about the Harwood Institute, which I will not be the one addressing because it's not my expertise, but there's at least one other person on this call who's very informed about it. And most of that information is in a appendix for this. But back to the who and how, which is section H, we did identify, and this is what I found quite interesting, is we sort of who did we successfully reach out to in 2018, thought we did a good job with. And then we started thinking about who we may have missed. And I, for one, was somewhat shocked to realize that notwithstanding what we thought we'd done a really good job on, there was a whole bunch of holes that we could fill. And this is a part of the place where I think the Harwood Institute process will be very helpful to us. And I attended the OLA session for the board members on Harwood, and I think I raised it in my report to you guys. And I was interested in how that presentation was really about how to listen to the community with the idea of addressing diversity and developing greater inclusion, and not necessarily saying getting people on the board, well, that's also an option, but really just to make we can hear these voices and start to make sure that our programs, our services, and our decision making all reflect those kinds of voices as well. Then you'll see section I is a very comprehensive process for consultation, and that would be something that, as we talked about with that printed newsletter this year, that would make sure that people heard about this and participated. And that actually is one comment that came up, is after our last plan, some of the criticism we heard from the community was that they didn't know this was going on and didn't have a chance to provide input, which we thought was kind of surprising because we thought we were pretty comprehensive. Well, if we thought we were comprehensive last time, we are this time with this couple of pages worth of detail. Anyway, that was somewhat more long-winded than I thought I would be, considering I didn't think about this in advance. But those are my kind of opening comments. If Sabrina or Mary wish to add to what I had to say.
Oh, may I ask Mary if, can we find Mary on the screen? If Mary would have any thoughts on this, because we haven't heard from her in this one.
Yeah, the discussion we had was very thoughtful as a working group, and yeah, we definitely were building this process off of the previous process we used in 2018, which was successful, and we got a very comprehensive strategic plan and community feedback from. And so we looked at new methodologies that we can use, such as community-led libraries and Hardwood Institute, to see if there was any opportunities to start filling some of those gaps that happen, right? So we're not looking for perfection, but we are looking to do better this time, and to reach more folks and hear more voices. So we really want to hear the voices of our community. We want to involve them in our processes, and we want to hear their aspirations, some of the things that are happening in their lives, and how the library can help them achieve these aspirations. So that's what we're really curious to learn from our community, especially with the different major events that have taken place and have been made more, we've all become more aware of some of these social issues that have come up because of the pandemic, or have been highlighted because of the pandemic. And so we're looking forward to including those voices and addressing those aspirations of our community and our strategic plan.
Good, thank you. Sabrina, you must be there someplace. Anything else, Sabrina, you'd like to add?
I think one of the big changes that we'll see with this strategic plan from the previous, the users were definitely interviewed and focus grouped, and events they participated in. One of the main areas that we're using, in addition to trying to hit non-users, is trying to work with our partners. And that's not something that we did as strongly last year as what we're doing now. Not last year, but last time. In 2018, we worked with our partners, but we didn't work with people who could be partners as an outreach. So for example, we now have religious leaders on our list of people we should speak with. Not because we want to bring in a religiosity into it, but we know that they're doing a lot of the hands-on services in our community. So working with them to say, what can we do? What can we bring to the table? How can we support your mandates? Makes us, again, a solution maker, and makes us a team player in our community. So I think that that might be one of the biggest differences when it comes to the consultation process that we see this year, is it's not just looking at individual users and social group users like teachers or our seasonal workers, that we're also trying to go to people that we regularly partner with and those that maybe our outreach hasn't hit. So I think it'll be a different type of a strategic plan. And I think that we may see some changes in our direction, but I also think that a lot of the issues that we dealt with in the 2018 plan, even though we have accomplished many of those goals successfully, they are at the heart and the core of what a GLAM service does. So we may see similar words, but what it means to achieve those will also begin to change as we move forward, both with the pandemic situation and at the next layer of accomplishment of our organization as we continue to make impacts and grow.
Thank you. I see you have a lot of recommendations here, and maybe if we moved through those, I will come back. Does anyone else, any other board members have questions of the three committee members? No, okay. As I was saying, let's move through the recommendations first of all, and we'll see what happens there. The first recommendation is that this board approve report number GOV 21.08 entitled Proposed Strategic Planning Process as the outline and plan for completion of the strategic plan for 2022 and to 2026. I need someone to move that, if I may, to make the motion. Joanne, seconder. Rob, before we have the the question, I would just like to ask, say two things. Approve it as amended, perhaps, because Probus is not a service club. It is grouped with the Lions and so forth. It is not a service club. And do you mind my asking what BIPOC members means?
Certainly BIPOC is a new term or relatively new term. An acronym, it is biracial, indigenous, and people of color. So looking at diversity.
Thank you. Okay, now come back to the motion, which is on the floor. All in favor? Joanne, yes. Against? It's carried. Okay, turning the page. I don't know how you make this motion, because I'm sorry, this recommendation, Sabrina, you can't make it. Lori technically can't make it. Would one of the other members of the board like to look at that recommendation and make it in the form of a motion?
And I can certainly move it.
I guess you can, Lori. You can, yeah.
Well, I'd be happy to move it, and basically, the wording is there, that the board appoint me, and if there's somebody else interested, Sabrina, along with Mary, manager of community outreach, to complete the phases of the strat plan. This would be a working group. We'll have the responsibility to complete the strategic plan study and report back to the board with a responsive list of goals and objectives which can meet the expectations of a 21st century GLAM.
I will second that. Are there any discussion on that motion?
Do we need to fill in another name? Anyone else interested? It will be a bit of work. So I think whoever says yes should be expecting to put some time in.
In 2018, when we did this, it was our busiest group.
Any members of the board would like to volunteer to join that group? Well, the question is then, would the group be happy to continue on as a threesome?
Yeah, I'm okay with that.
Laurie, Sabrina, you're okay with that?
Certainly.
Mary, Mary seems gone again.
Absolutely, it'd be a pleasure.
Thank you, Mary. All right, well, is it okay then to just proceed with appoint Laurie Gillies and Sabrina Saunders and the manager of community outreach, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera?
Yes.
The question, all in favor? Oh, you can't see my hand, but there it is. Against? I missed the four, so I can't call it. Was it all hands?
Yes, it was.
Thank you. I didn't see it on the screen. It's carried. Laurie, keep going.
Okay. So the next recommendation, which I'd be happy to move, is the board provide training for general board involvement at the board meeting, and a more specific training on the methods to be utilized for those board members who will be participating in phase 1 and 2 of the study. And those are the phases that will involve this listening stage. So, and I don't know whether this is maybe Mary, you could comment on what that training is about.
Thanks, Lori. So the training is going to be about how we can engage with the community and practice asking questions around the community's aspirations, how they use the library, and how they wish to use the library. So it would be, how do we go out and connect with folks and do those community consultations in an informal way and more formally through through virtual focus groups and consultation. And so the training would be a mix between theory and practice and like role-playing activities. So like with the group, so.
Okay, Joanne?
Who would best provide this training, and do we have any price points?
The training will be in-house. We have actually put Mary through the training program herself. So she will become a train the trainer and will be able to work with us to do that. So instead of bringing in a consultant and having, you know, a price point that way, we've worked with our staff to make sure our staff have the skills and we'll be able to work with the rest of us.
Are you figuring this is during a board meeting or a continuation of a board meeting or a separate date?
As we move into sort of the phase 1 and 2 training of anyone who's going to be involved in the more one-on-one discussions, that will be a special board meeting. And then for training purposes, and then other aspects will be part of our main board meeting, whether it's talking about a topic or having a short 10-minute bit that will be something that we're looking at together. So it'll be a combination.
How long would these meetings go on? Not daily. I mean, how many meetings do you visualize us having?
The main training will be one main training that we're doing as a special training, and it really will be about looking at how to run a session, both from the formal end, as well as how to be someone who is a listener and not an interviewer. Because in many of these cases, the way that you could do this is as you're going to your normal meeting that you would go to, a service meeting, a club meeting. If Morris, you're going for a tea time and we all have the clubhouses back open and you can have a conversation with people, there's a way that you could prompt a conversation that will bring some of that informal information back without it being a formal interview. So it's that type of work that we would like to get members of the board and our volunteers, maybe our ACC members, that you're not going to an area that's a cold call. You know, we don't want somebody who's a non-skier going to the ski club and interviewing, but somebody who is part of a group that you already have those rapport, being able to bring some of that information back that helps to do with the early information for us. That's what's really different about Harwood, as opposed to just saying we're going to run 4 focus groups and we get it all in 4 focus groups and then we're done. This is really about having ears and eyes across our community and bringing back information from various sectors, various communities within our community, various interest groups, and engaging others who might not normally have wanted to participate in other phases as well.
Gary, Jesse, Rob, do you have any thoughts, questions to throw into the discussion?
Nothing more than what's been said.
I think it's a very interesting approach, and I think we could all benefit from board training for sure, and probably the initial session and maybe some updates.
So what are you really looking for here? Is a one-day training or just?
Partial day training. At this point with the resolution, we're just getting the board to add this onto the board training plan so that we can now prepare what it will be, and then we'll bring back a day and a time and schedule with everyone and make sure.
Okay, okay. That makes life easy for us then.
I would so move, Mr. Chair.
So
So
Gary
Lori has moved and Gary second.
Sure.
All in favor? Carried. You don't get a vote, Mary. Nothing against you. Okay, we've got that one done.
So the next motion is the suggestion of revisiting the mission, vision, and value and mandates in or after phase 2 of the planning process as part of the consultation, and make amendments to those key documents as informed by the research and consultation. I mentioned that earlier when I was commenting. So I'd be happy to move that. Oops.
Someone to second that motion?
Rob has his hand up.
Oh, Rob.
Yeah, I'll second that. Yeah.
Morris has gone psychedelic.
As usual, yes.
Oh, there, that's back to
You're
normal.
back.
He's heard they're reopening the golf courses.
No, I'm growing my hair like John Tory. Anyhow, I'm not sure what, we have a motion on the floor, I think.
Yeah.
All in favor, let's get. Carried. And Laurie again,
Okay, so then the last motion is to approve a budget for the advertising and implementation of the planning process across the municipality. And I don't have a budget figure for that, and I'm hoping that Sabrina has one to propose.
We have not sat down and actually created the budget, but within our overall board budget, we do have 4,500 that is remaining. So if the board is comfortable with that, I would like to have an upset limit of the 4,500. We will bring back a budget as we start to determine what our needs will be for printing and other things like that.
is everyone happy with that?
Is that enough to cover your lunches, Lori?
Yeah, it's gonna be tight. I'm gonna have to cut down on the wine, I tell you. So I'm happy to move that, especially with the wine.
An upset limit of $4,500, yes, added to the words. Did we have a seconder? Did we have a mover?
Lori
Lori.
moved and Joanne has her hand up.
Oh, there she is. Good. The motion is on the floor. All in favor? Carried. Hey, Laurie, I think you've done a good job there.
Great job.
Yeah,
Thank you.
excellent.
Thank you.
Sabrina, we're back to you, I think.
All right, so our next item is looking at the verbal update of our YouTube users. And I believe Hannah is on to be able to give that.
Is she live? Hannah?
Yes, I am here.
Oh, good. Go ahead.
I'm just going in to say that we have surpassed the limit needed to have a custom URL. The limit on YouTube was 100 subscribers. We are now sitting at 174, meaning that we now have our own custom link that is youtube.com/C for channel / the Blue Mountains Public Library. This surpasses what we were looking for that limit in order to have that custom link, but we'll continue to monitor and update as we continue to get more subscribers throughout the year.
Thank you, Sabrina. Anything more, Sabrina?
No, unless there were questions on our other YouTube usage, I think that we're doing well with that one.
Everyone happy?
Yeah.
Lori?
You've actually given us numbers of who's watched board meetings in the past. Do you have those numbers for the last meeting? Maybe not yet.
The last meeting we do, it's a little bit unusual because it wasn't streamed because it was a closed meeting. And we only put up those first few minutes and end of the minutes. So it's very low, obviously, because it just says we're going into closed session and we're out of closed session.
Okay, never mind. So,
Okay.
Not a normal month to be able to look at statistics.
right, yeah.
Thank you, Hannah. Let's move on to No, Joanne, we'll hear from you if we may.
Very quickly, I attended as our rep to the newly formed board assembly. And I was surprised to find out that the greatest number of libraries in Ontario are those that service under 2,500 patrons. That's about 100 of them. We, from 5,000 to 10,000, there are 43 in the province. And that, of course, this was run by Brandon Fratricelli, that, if you'll recall, Morris first trained us out in Owen Sound.
Oh,
And
yeah.
he was just a newbie at the time. So I'm glad to say that he's much more confident now. And he was joined by Stephen Krause, who's got this deep, gravelly voice. And they seem to be very well familiar with Sabrina. And it became a contest of the 14 of us who attended from our group about who has the best CEO. So good to know that it's a love fest in the libraries. So they just reminded us that they would approach provincial, not local issues. And so there are things like that's Lori's baby of governance and strategic leadership, executive limits, and promoting government funding. And they were really pushing an app called Learn, Learn, HQ.ca, and they wanted all board members to come on board to have some training. And I actually looked at their schedule. I haven't brought myself to actually join one of those, but they seemed interesting. And they mentioned that the super conference again will be virtual from February 1st to the 5th. And that's it for that. It was mostly teaching us what they're on about in the future.
Any comments or questions of Joanne? Okay, thank you. We'll move on to item number F 3.2.
So if everyone remembers, at the March meeting, we provided the full list of policy review that was due in this, our third year of the board. That included all of the annual items that we have to do each year by legislation, such as our health and safety. It also included the items that had to do with our designated in the annual policy statements for our values, our mission, and our vision. And Lori spoke to those a bit earlier. And then it also has to do with some of our COVID materials. So what we have done here is everyone had them in March because we knew our April meeting was going to be the closed meeting only, so that notice would be given in a public session. Everyone was asked to give me comments of any major changes that you saw by April 23rd. All of the comments I received were that there was no changes, or you agreed with the few staff recommended changes that were there. So unless there are any additional items that anyone would like to bring forward, I think, Mr. Chair, we can move the motion as they read.
Except for the actual wording, this board, having completed the annual policy review, approve the amendments as suggested. And we don't have to reauthorize anything, do we?
We have to reauthorize the annual ones that we have to legislatively have reviewed. Reauthorizing is just our way of stating that we've reviewed them according to the legislation. And then the lists are above, so we don't have to read off each one, but it will be as stated in the list above. And I will include that in the resolution when we print it.
Can you word that motion okay, Sabrina?
Yes.
would someone care to move this motion that Sabrina's trying to, and I'm trying to get my hands around?
So that this board, having completed the annual policy review, approve amendments to, and that will be policy admin 2018.45, commitment to health and safety, and policy admin 2018-48, respectful workplaces. And to reauthorize, and that would be the final ones in that bulleted list, the fire safety, emergency preparedness, the work alone, the AODA requirements and employments of individuals with disabilities, the accessible customer service, the fit for work, and the pandemic response.
Thank you. May I have someone move that?
You can play golf on Saturday.
I'm sorry, was there a move? Joanne, thank you. Is it someone to second it? Rob, all in favor? Carried. That is carried. You haven't discussed the three-year policies, year three policies, have you?
The year three policies are the vision, the values, and the mission. And as we discussed a while back earlier in our presentation, we were looking at those being brought back. There are edits in there. So since we've already actually approved that they're being brought back, we may just want to approve the recommended administrative changes to the mission, vision, and values, and drop the second half of that sentence because we've already approved that.
Someone to move?
Lori?
Lori moved and seconder.
Gary?
Gary, all in favor? It's carried. Sorry, you just have to interject here. I can play golf on Saturday.
Woo!
But do you want to?
That's what I was hinting at before. The list just came out a few minutes ago, and a lot of outdoor things will reopen this
Yeah.
weekend.
How about tennis? Where's that?
Tennis is included, Lori. That's Catherine was telling me that, yes.
And you'll be happy to know that the skateboard parks are reopening too, Lori. So get your
Absolutely, yeah.
skateboard out.
Okay, I'll do that.
I have a board if you need to borrow one, Lori.
Oh, gee, thank you. Going to get me
You're a
killed.
skier, you can handle it.
Eh,
You know, Sabrina, if I may, if it was possible, we should take a break here, but we won't. We'll carry on because
If you
this,
would like to take a minute, we can, certainly.
and would anyone like, hi, Dorothy. Would anyone like to take a minute break?
Boris, is this so you can practice your putting?
I don't need any practice. I can hit it every time. Doesn't go in the hole, but Dorothy, these people are giving me a hard time. I'm glad you came.
I'm here for you, Morris.
Thank you, thank you. All right, forget the break. We'll carry on. Sabrina, tell us about the budget.
Okay.
Go ahead.
So the budget, if you remember correctly, in the March meeting and I believe the April meeting, we began discussions in the open session in March, and then at the end of the open session in April, we had a conversation about a request that had been made both at council in the budget hearings last year, as well as a recommendation by the mayor that had come in since that point. And that was for the board to consider moving forward with a designated number that would be generated by an external source of how we would have a budget aligned each year so that the board would pass the budget and we wouldn't be going back to council every year to ask for the budget. At the time, the mayor's recommendation at both the meeting that we had with the mayor, the deputy mayor, and the CAO, as well as back last year in the early winter when the budget hearings were happening, was that that would be based on the assessment rate. Having looked closer at that, that's not something that the finance department thinks would be a functional option And instead, in conversations, we came to look at the CPI, which is the Canadian Consumer Pricing Index, so basically inflation. So same concept, it would be based on an external number that would designate what the library's increase would be from year to year. So if we were to do CPI, for example, that would mean that the June CPI, which is a national interest rate or national increase rate, would be identified. And at this point, it's right about 2.2 to 2.7. We'll find out in a few weeks what it will be. And then that number would be known to the board and to myself and the staff that this is the number that we're working with. We would then bring a budget to the board, and the board would approve a budget based on that number. It would not go to council because council would already have an agreement with the board that said whatever the June CPI rate is, that is what our increase would be from year to year. There are a few issues that come with that, and that would be, you know, what happens if, for example, there is a decrease in the CPI. It does happen. It does not happen often, but it certainly does happen. And we have some conditions that we have started speaking of. For example, that there would be a floor, so a not less than number. So for example, 0.5% with not less than the TPM staffing increase, because even if the CPI goes down, we know that typically our staff wages, which are tied to the town's salary grid, go up on average about 1% every year. So we would have to make sure that we are keeping in step with the grid and could not be in a deficit. So that is one of those conditions. Another condition is that this would be on our operational and our capital and our revenue sources only, and it would not include any of the interfunctional transfers or maintenance, that the town would take care of those things on their own still. Also looking at the fact that if there is surplus, that surplus could be rolled over or held in a reserve for the board, which would help potentially in some years if there was you know, a bubble to explode on CPI. We saw that after the 2008 bubble burst on investments. We saw about 2009, 2010, the CPI dropped and then it came back up again. Another piece that would be part of those conditions would be that expansion needs, specifically major capital, would not be part of the capital budget. So in other words, our capital budget would be things like our books, our furniture needs, our technology needs, our shelving, but it would not include the building. And that would still remain as a town asset to be part of their facility capital budgets. And we would work with them to make the presentations on that single item when we're ready to go forward with any expansion or major changes to our facilities. So that would be excluded from this budget in that agreement. And then the other piece that is, I think, my biggest concern with moving forward is that currently we have the 2021 salary study that is being considered by the town. An external company has been brought in to look at the entire grid. And I would want the agreement, or at least the report that's going to council, and I have spoken with the director of finance about this, to identify that the 22, if we were to accept CPI, we would have to be able to take into account what the salary study says. So for example, if a group of our staff who are currently listed as a grade 2 wage, we believe should be at a grade 4 wage, if that increase happens, we couldn't be at a $50,000 deficit in year 1, and CPI will not give us $50,000 increase, that we would have the ability to go to council without breaking the agreement on this one-off anomaly, that we know the salary study is under consideration and we don't know what the response will be. And this decision of CPI would be made before council goes on break, so in June and July, and the salary study probably will not be received until November. So we would want that to be written in, that there is an understanding that we would be coming back if the salary study puts us in an immediate situation that we would be asking for that portion to be topped up as a one-off so that we could then continue forward with CPI. So if there's questions, I certainly can answer them. I know that's a lot of information. It's in the spirit, if we can put it that way, of what both council and the mayor had asked us to consider. It's not using the same criteria of assessment, but it is using an external number that is, you know, designated by what's happening in our, in this case, nationally, that would be a number that council could look to on a date and say, that's what the budget is without question, that it would just be done. And then it would be up to the board to make the decisions on what is the priority of the organization and how best that budget would be spent.
Sabrina, does anyone want to jump forward with questions? Jesse?
Sabrina, divorce your mind entirely from the position or attitude of the board. You've told us all the pros. Now, what are the cons?
The con is definitely that the CPI drops. So if at some point we have a bubble that bursts on our economy, we would have a negative number. And that is why,
surely what a con has to be that we're locked in the event of any, isn't that a con?
It would certainly be a con if the board has major initiatives and changes that you're looking at.
Shouldn't that be at the top of the list?
I have not seen anything that the board is looking to do that would be significantly different, but if the board is looking as part of a strategic plan to increase major numbers of expenditures, then that is most definitely a negative. But I can't say that if that was something that the board requested, going to council would get us those numbers either.
Go ahead, Jesse.
Mr. Chairman, it seems to me that this is maybe the most significant single decision that this board may have to make this year, because it locks us in theoretically permanently to a maximum level of increase without having to go on our hands and knees for anything more. I think you should strike a committee to study this in a little more depth before we take a position on it.
Well, thank you, Jesse. That's a good question. I was actually excuse me, thinking along those. Hang on. Thinking along those lines. That maybe rather than us having committee striking a subcommittee, we really are pressed for time. If I'm not mistaken, our next board meeting is on the 17th of June. The town will be making decisions of some kind on June the 15th. We have to have something in front of them before that. We have basically 2 weeks sort of thing. Get a committee comes back to the board as a whole. My suggestion would be, why don't we just have an in-house closed camera meeting next week at this time, 2 o'clock, full all the members, and discuss this one subject and come up with an answer.
Well, I'm fine with that. What you're really saying is a special meeting of the board.
Correct.
I'm just wondering whether or not we need some, how shall I put this? Some professional expert input on by an economist or long-term. We're locking ourselves into something which we may never be able to change.
Good point. Joanne?
What do you mean that we might never be able to change? If we make
We don't know what the next board is going to do or what the next council is going to do. Once we've agreed that we will not increase our budget by more than inflation. Supposing that there's a board 10 years or 5 years from today, or a council 5 years from today that says, that's all the money you're gonna get, even though your building is falling down. I know it's their building and it's their money, but we don't know what the tax rates are going to be like and how the board is going to, the council is going to react,
But we don't know that anyway.
which is why I think freedom of action is preferable to being something set in stone.
Mary?
Certainly, one way around it a little bit is to put a review period after, say, a 4-year period or something.
Well,
2-year period, yeah, because now we don't know the unknowns either. I agree with you. But and again, major capital is not part of this. Regular maintenance not part
no,
of it.
I know.
So in a regular year, and we're certainly not in regular times, but we aren't always. You would expect to live with some budget that is roughly around inflation. But I would agree, we would need some sort of review period after 2 to 4 year period to coincide with the new councils and boards.
Okay, that's the how-to. You're getting into the how-to, and we haven't decided about the timing and so forth. Rob, you had a contribution, I think.
Yeah, I think the idea is try to get us some certainty from one year to the next about what we can expect in the budget. The only problem with not using the method that we were talking about tied to assessment is that we don't see any benefit from growth. There's a big difference between consumer price index and the growth that we experience as we have construction and new development taking place, which over the next few years is going to be substantial. And if we don't see the benefits of that, it's going to leave us behind a little bit. So I'm a little concerned about that. And my argument with the rest of council would be that we if we're going to tie one element of our local government to consumer price index, we have to build in some way of them benefiting from growth.
Good point, good point. But bear in mind, if it is my understanding that the going an assessment route is just not a go. Is that correct, Sabrina?
That is, and I think that's
To the
the
best of your
question-
knowledge?
Yeah, that's the question that I would have for Rob, is if the push is going to continue to be within council to work within an assessment rate, then certainly this is something that we should wait until the assessment rate is going to be pervasive across all departments. My understanding is that was not something that was being recommended.
Yeah, but we do know what the percentage growth is, or what can be expected from year to year and even a few years ahead. So we could look and if we're expecting, 3% more taxation just coming from growth, which is the money that comes in from new homes that are built that expand our tax base by a certain percentage, then that adds to the amount of taxation coming in without raising the tax rate. It's just new money. It's like you've expanded your customer base. And so that's what we would be losing out on. So I would want to try and see that we benefit from that somehow, that if we're expecting a 3% growth rate next year, then we would see a 3% increase in our share of the budget.
In other words, the greater of one or the other.
That might be a good way to look at it, Jesse. You're right.
Could I just interject again? I really think this is quite a complex subject for us to be discussing.
Yes.
It is late in the day. Could I come back to my suggestion? Would you agree if I called a special meeting, closed door meeting, for next week at 2 o'clock, which is the 27th, to discuss this subject and come to a conclusion? Is everyone agreeable with that? Pardon?
That's the 27th?
Yes, a week today.
That's fine with me.
I have county council and it's always hard to know. It usually is not over by 2 o'clock. So I might not be available at least for part of the meeting.
Well, I only said that was an easy date to pick out. I mean, everyone has commitments, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah,
And unfortunately, we got to do it fairly fast because we only got, I, I think we're right in saying 2 weeks, no more, before this board
okay.
can come to a conclusion.
The
I
the
picked
third
that
is open.
particular. Pardon?
The third is open for me if, or if that works for everybody else, but just
What about,
next
what
Thursday
about the
would be out.
26th?
I think the 26th might be all right as well. Uh,
Well, you see,
later on
that's
yeah, the
exactly what I was.
26th. Yeah, the 26th would be fine.
How about a little later on the 27th?
Yeah.
I can't do later.
Yeah, later.
Excuse me, Laura, you can't
Yeah,
do
I was-
later than.
I can't do it later on the 27th.
And
So we
Dorothy,
have
I
the
haven't heard from
26th
you.
in the afternoon, and I believe I heard the 3rd as well.
Well, I think sooner is better. So maybe the 26th, or you go ahead with the 27th and I'll join as soon as I can.
On the other hand, the 3rd, if that, assuming that would give us enough, if we come to a decision then, Sabrina, that would give us enough time, et cetera. That gives us, and you, I'm sorry, you, more time to prepare. Like to fill us in, you could probably do a lot of good stuff between now and then, including even talking to
Yes.
Ruth, the Director of Finance. Would the 3rd, which is a Thursday, at 2 o'clock be acceptable?
I'm good.
Dorothy?
Yes, I'm open then.
Good. Joanne, you're okay?
I'm okay, but I would like Dorothy because she has some expertise, I think. No.
Do you have it in consumer inflation rates and stuff?
I'm
Not
really,
much on inflation rates. I appreciate the vote of confidence though, Joanne, but it's not exactly my skill set. I don't think you'd be losing a lot.
okay. Well, I have no, at this point, no input, and I don't know how I can make myself an economic giant within a week or two. It's just not my baby, you know?
We'll work on it, Joanne.
You got 2 weeks. Come on.
Joanne, that's why they invented Google.
That's
Uh,
correct. Yeah.
Well,
Gary, how's that time for you? The
Which
3rd,
time are we talking about? June 3rd?
June 3rd, yes.
Yeah, that's fine by me. I'm just wondering if that gives us enough time because when I think about it, again, in a normal year, it works great. If you add on to your building size, an expansion, then obviously you're going to need more programming, more staffing. I would think.
Yeah, but we're only talking about one day.
But I think, Mr. Chair, Gary's point is something that the mayor had asked for us to do in the original exercise when we had the conversation, which was to find out what we needed over the next 5 years, so to speak. And you're right, if there's an expansion, our overall costs go up. Staffing goes up, materials go up, technology goes up. And I think that these are things that have to be built in clearly into the agreement, that as we are coming back to council, looking at expansions, whether it is expansion at LE Shore or a new building in the Craigleith area, these are understood that you would have to say part of having a multi-million-dollar building project includes adjusting these base numbers. There can't be an expectation that you're now going to have another building and still do it with the same operational or minor capital dollars. So I think those are things that have to be built in to an understanding and to this agreement. And that when we are making a pitch to council for an expansion, it is an understanding that it's not just the building dollars, that the operational and managerial portions have to be considered. And I know council would want to see that. So those would be points where these sort of base numbers would have to be evaluated and looked at We wouldn't be going back on an annual basis and trying to change the numbers. But certainly as major milestones happen in the life cycle of the organization, these would be things we would have to be dealing with.
Okay, Gary, you've got some good points there. And I think what you've mentioned can better be discussed at a one topic meeting. And coming back to what I was saying, is Thursday, June the 3rd, okay with everybody at this point, except maybe Dorothy? Okay, therefore, Sabrina, I guess I can call a meeting. It'll be a closed meeting. Laurie?
I'm just wondering if we might start a bit earlier, if that's possible, say 1 o'clock. I have a hard stop at 4 o'clock.
Okay, fine. I'll go along with that. Is say 1 o'clock start okay with everybody?
Sure.
I mean, we're not doing anything else. We're not working, are we? Except Sabrina.
I am.
Okay, I'll call it for 1 o'clock then, Sabrina.
Fine.
Okay. Thank you. That was good. The 3rd.
Our next item, Mr. Chair, is looking at the salary study CEO job description. So
Yes.
part of, and I presented this actually about 2 months ago, that we were participating in the salary study review. And one of the job descriptions that had to be adjusted to move again from the job fact sheet into a job description so that it more aligned with what the town's documents were. So they were comparing apples to apples, so to speak, was the CEO job description. All of the others are administrative, so I was able to do those on my own as an approval, but this one comes back to the board because it is mine.
Yeah, okay, right. I take your point now. You've all seen this updated, revised version of the job description for the CEO. Does anyone have any, excuse me, I've got to shuffle papers here. Does anyone have any questions to Sabrina on that? I looked up the previous job description, and Sabrina, it is definitely different, isn't it?
It's all of the same content. It's just moved around to meet the same organizational structure as the towns.
As the towns, yeah, okay. Well, I can't argue with that. I mean, that's a good idea. But when I looked at it in detail, if you think of page 4, the education, etc., and relative work experience, I made a note on here, and this is pertinent. Well, no, I hope it's not pertinent, but for us to hire a CEO, for any board to hire another CEO, you're calling for a minimum of 10 years experience as in the library business, with at least 5 years experience as a senior level.
And senior level is managers or on, which is pretty standard for a director level CEO.
Right, okay. But it used to be 5 years as CEO.
It did not list the actual experience in the industry.
Okay, yeah. Just a point, that's all. Is that sort of consistent with, again, the town criteria?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions or discussion on this subject?
Pretty much says everything but walk on water.
Should we add that?
Is that something you wanted, Gary?
Well, in this COVID world, you never know anymore.
Okay, hang on. Would someone care to move that this board approve the CEO job description as presented? Someone to move?
I will.
Dorothy, a seconder?
I second.
Gary?
Yes.
All in favor? That's carried. hang in there. What are we moving to now?
So the strategic plan goals under vibrant spaces, the first item we actually took at the top of the section,
yeah,
which
yeah,
was
yeah.
what Phil participated in. So we're moving on to F4.2, the leisure activity plan.
Oh, yeah, okay. I knew there was something else I was missing there. Sabrina, you still have the floor on this. Would you please bring us up to date on this?
Certainly. So the leisure activity plan, we have participated with the town's committee superficially. The consultant that they have has worked with myself, has worked with our documents, has spoken to some of our managers. And in the conversations that we've had with the CAO and in the conversations with the mayor, it's come to light that the board sees and the staff as well, sees the discussions on community hubs as being really a matter of what's happening on the east end of the community. So what's happening in Craigleith. When the Vibrant Spaces Committee was meeting with the town in 2019, that was always the assumption that when we're talking about doing the leisure activities plan and the master facilities plan discussions to find out what community hubs are needed, we weren't talking about removing or replacing Ellie Shore. We were talking that Ellie Shore was a hub, is a hub. There may be some expansions needed to Ellie Shore, but when the West End is discussed, Ellie Shore stays where it is. So this resolution is to be able to provide to that town committee and actually to the council to go to the report that the Director of Community Services will be presenting, so that it's saying just that we acknowledge that we are looking at community hubs, but Thornbury West End Community Hub is Ellie Shore from a library standpoint, and we are not looking to remove Ellie Shore, simply to expand it in the future.
Okay.
So it's really just a housekeeping piece to be able to clean up some of the discussions in that report of what West End hubs would be, where the library fits on that.
That seems pretty straightforward. Could I have someone make that particular motion? Joanne, second to Rob. All in favor? That's carried. Okay. All right, Sabrina, you're still there.
All right. So the next report is the CEO report. I will quickly go through a few highlights, and certainly if anyone has questions, I can take those as well. We've had our general statistics here again. You can see that we have increased our card holders since the close of December. If you remember looking at the year in review, our card numbers had decreased at the very end of December. And that really was a case of people who had expired not coming into the building to do it. And now that we're back to when we were back in the early part of the winter of 21 and we were open, people returned back into the library and they were able to renew their cards. What we did for people is we just didn't let them expire. They just kind of continued, but then we saw sort of that decline where right in the last 2 weeks, it seemed like everybody's cards expired and then were renewed right away. So we are bringing ourselves back up to our more normal numbers on our card holders. Our circulations are holding, and definitely our digital circulations are higher than our physical, but we have got quite the curbside still going. We're looking forward to being able to open the building soon, hopefully in June. There is information here about our gallery as well. We have a number of ACC presents that have been happening, and these are having large numbers of views. So there was one that is noted here, the Waterfalls of Beaver Valley has 817 views as of the premiere, and this report was written a week ago. So I'm sure that's one that is continuing to grow. We have started working with more series so that if it's one that you like, we package them together so that it's a playlist that hopefully they continue down the line of other videos that they might be interested in as people are finding our YouTube page. Our YouTube bit that Hannah was speaking of is there, saying that we have now achieved a number that means that we have our own legitimate name on YouTube as opposed to just being a string of numbers. We are now a / Blue Mountains Public Library. Our archive and museum has given, again, various numbers of users that have come through in the previous month. And by far, Willie Winkles continues to be our sort of #1. That is just a great, great collection to go to. But you'll see that the Beaver River Rat Race was one that we've just released. So only 87 people, but that's just in the first few weeks, not even a full month. And if you were local to the town back in the 60s and 70s and you remember that, there are some great photos in there. If you know people who have photos that they would like to share, the beauty of our biblioboard in our virtual museum is that you can upload pictures and then we can include that as part of our collections. So we know there's more out there in the community, and we hope to be able to get more local content images that will be able to expand many of these programs. A new one that we've released that doesn't have any usership yet because it's just actually opened right in the last day of the month was the Staying at Home Stories. And that is a biblioboard, a virtual museum exhibit having to do with COVID. So some of the things are pictures of people having, you know, the video conversation Thanksgiving dinner, where there's a computer at the table so that you can see other people. It's how people were visiting. It's some of the signs that you saw, you know, on display boards, and people putting things up in their windows with rainbows and all of those types of things that are the stories and the images of where we've been over the past 14 months. So I'm sure that will also continue to grow. From a staffing end, we have some new staff with us. Every summer, our numbers do increase as we get some of our youth workers and co-op students. So Franz Greenfield is a co-op student who is here from Georgian College. This is our second year bringing in a co-op from the Office Admin program. He's been very active in doing a number of key projects in various partnerships that we're involved in. So that's something that he's been making great strides and really jumping into coding on Excel and things that nobody ever thought that they would be working on when they came to start on their first day as a co-op. We also have a high school co-op student, and that is Jonathan. He's a grade 12 student from Georgian Bay. So he's with us doing 2 credits and has been doing quite a lot of support for our youth programming and doing inventories and shelf reading and really trying to clean up the collection before we reopen. We also have another co-op at the depot that is Zachary McLean, and he is here doing work throughout the summer with the curator at the museum, and both of those college co-op students are supported by our grants. So that's the beauty of being successful on the grant writing, is we get to bring in youth that are bringing a new energy to us, new skill sets, and new labor opportunities, but at the same point, we're also training them to be the future leaders in our community. So that's a great win-win, I think. Beyond that, we have a new staffer who has been here for about a year as a fill-in, a maternity leave fill-in position, Natasha Hudson. She is here for part-time, and she's at Meaford Public Library part-time. And she actually was able to fill in and take on the position of our interlibrary loan staff when we had a recent retirement. So Helene Schofield retired, and she has taken on that position. Beyond that, we have our statistics for our numbers, and you'll see that for our e-newsletter, which is our primary form of communication with our community, we have 1,310 people who have registered, subscribed for that. which is 1,300 of our active card holders, which is about just under a third, bit more than a quarter of our card holders. So we still have a lot of movement that we can make there, given how many people use our library services and our facilities that are not part of our e-newsletter. So we will continue to try to grow that number as we go. If there's any questions, I can take that.
Any questions?
Question?
Yeah. Go ahead. Jeff.
Sabrina, is it possible to renew a library card online?
Yes, we can also do it over the phone.
In your experience, are most renewals done face-to-face, physically?
In the past 14 months, most of them have been done over the phone. Typically, they are done more face-to-face when people would be coming in. But given that currently face-to-face is on a curbside pickup, it's been easier for people to call because they're trying to get their hold material and they're being rejected.
I really meant pre-pandemic.
Typically, that would be face-to-face. So the next time
Okay.
you come in, you check out a book, we say, you know, your card is expiring or has expired. We check all of your information to make sure
Okay.
you're still in the same place, and we do it right there.
Okay, thank you.
Anyone else? Sabrina, why don't you move on to the next little item, the 5.2? Keep going, please.
So our next item is the Real History series. And for that one, it's just an update. I just wanted to let everybody know that we are actively working on 2 new films. So this is our 9th and 10th film. The 9th film, though, is something that was commissioned by council for us to do for them. So this is another place where we're being a solution maker for the town, and we do try to keep doing those as often as we can, whether it's a partnership or trying to fill a gap. So one of the issues that came forward with the meetings on the task force, the recovery task force, is many of our festivals that happen in the community aren't happening because of the ability to gather. And one of those is the Apple Harvest Festival, which was a partnership between Blue Mountains Resort and the BIA and many groups that sell Apple products. So it was requested of us if we could do a second Apple film. The first one was on the Apple industry. This one for Real History is having to do with the more contemporary Apple aspect, and it's following a full season of growing, talking about our seasonal workers who are professional farmers that come in and support our farms and our community and how they're a fabric of the community, as well as the types of industries that come out of that. So beekeeping, for example. People don't think about the beekeepers and what their impact are to our harvest, but that's a whole industry that connects in. So that film is underway right now. We're also doing a film that we've just started, which is the 10th film, which is on Blue Mountain pottery. So both of those are going, one of which was in our plan all along to do the Blue Mountain pottery, knowing that there's a large gathering that is happening in our community, hopefully in 2022. So we'll have that available for that point. And then the other one was commissioned by the town to be released this fall during the weekend, which normally would be the Apple Harvest Festival.
Good, thank you. Okay, I need someone to move that this board receive the strategic plan discussions as information. Someone to move it? Lori, is that a yes? Seconder, Jesse, all in favor? Carried. Boy. The annual survey from the Ministry of Heritage, etc. Sabrina?
So annually, we have to submit our annual survey to the ministry. And this is done by April 30th. So I have completed that. There is a document that we need to sign. And I just bring it to the board annually to have the resolution that both I and the chair will sign that document.
So move.
Oh, thank you. Second by Joanne, all in favor? That's carried. That was fast.
Just trying to help, Mars.
Could you, could you, could you forge my signature, Sabrina?
I have a pile of papers. When everybody's ready to start coming back in, they can be signed.
Okay, all right, I'm only kidding. All right, Elisa, sign out here. Finance report.
Okay, so our finance report is a quarterly report as of March 31st. Normally, this would have been brought to the April board meeting, but since we were doing the closed session as our primary piece, we opted just to push this a month. Unless there are questions on it, certainly I will take those. There are two items that I haven't read just to sort of make a note pointing out. Our audited statements are in, so we now know what the current development charges are, and this is on the town's audit. Not yet approved, but the number for the town is 2 million, so we've surpassed the 2 million mark. And we also have the CHD reserve, which there was a number of fundraising that was done by CHD in the previous year, and that was able to be rolled over. So we had an increase there of almost 16,000. So that reserve for artifacts and artifact equipment is 58,000, almost 59,000.
Good. Not to minimize this, does anyone have any, first of all, on the quarterly report, does anyone have any questions?
Can I
Laurie?
just clarify something? I think I trip over this every time, but I think I know the answer. I just want to double check. Under the capital side, we have this strange account number 62,051. That's 2,002% spent. But there's also a line above it, 62,000, which is 0%. And I think those are in fact, one is showing the expenditure, one is showing the revenue, but it should be like this rather than like separate accounts. Is that true?
I believe you are looking at the materials.
I am.
Yes, so this is something we've worked on. I mean, it's not a real priority, but it is something that could be cleaned up from the finance end. We have 55,000 total in this year for materials. And you'll see that one line shows that nothing is spent, and then the next line shows that's where the money is coming out of. It's just a merging that has to happen on their end to switch the accounts properly. And you can see that they list it as adult nonfiction as being the area, but it really is, it's all print materials. So you are correct. It is a weird sort of typo that needs to be fixed, which is why it's showing 2002. It is a combined of 55,000. So you can see in that we are well underspent at this point on our materials, and we'll certainly get caught up when we're open to the public.
Okay. I trip over that each time. I think, that could be that badly overspent. Yeah. Okay, we're not. Thank you.
Any other questions or comments on these reports? Fine. I need someone to move that this board approve the 2020, well, first, yeah, the 2020 audited financial statements as
Oh,
presented.
that will actually be our next one, Mr. Chair.
Well, okay, well,
I will pull up that report for us. So our audit is complete. Once this is approved, we will put this onto our website, and that will be accompanied with the annual report, which we refer to as the year in review. Everything came out once again as positive. We were underspent on our budget, which was a little bit difficult to actually spend appropriately in 2020, just given the year that we had. If there are any specific questions, I am certainly willing to take them. I know not everybody reads audits regularly. The biggest thing is to know that we passed the audit successfully and have a fair ruling on our audit.
question then is, does anyone have any questions about that audited report? I don't have any questions. I accept it every year. So So this one, we do need a motion to approve acceptance of this 2020 audited financial statement.
That's
That's correct? Someone to move it? Joanne, seconder? I can't see a seconder. Laurie, all in favor? Carried. Now, I think then I've missed the quarterly report. Don't we have to approve acceptance of that, or is it just a
It
fact?
was one of the items that we just received as
Oh, yeah,
information.
okay. All right, thank you. All right. Was there any other business discussions, any business arising out of this section? Okay, moving on, if I may. Round table. All right, Sabrina, come back here and here again, please help me out.
So our roundtable, unless there are community updates or news, I know in our pandemic year, short of congratulating all of the golfers and tennis players on the call today that you get to start being active again, I don't have any community updates. We did list a few items that are on here of coming events, but that's about it.
Okay,
I have, if I could just give an update on the Rabbit program, which we launched on May 5th, and I think I updated you. That's the Rural Access to Broadband Internet Technologies. And we started the Speed Test Challenge. You can go to the Rabbit page on the town website, and there's a link there that you can click on. You can test the speed of the internet at your house or any other location. And what that does for us is it helps to create a map that we can use in obtaining funding from upper levels of government, as well as working with private partners. So we have a goal of 2,500 tests. We, in about 2 weeks, are up to 1,500. So we're doing quite well with that. It just takes a couple of minutes. If you find, there it is, and the link is there. You see where it says to conduct a test, please visit. And you fill in a little bit of information, and then it tells you, and you can see all the tests that are coming up. You can test more than once. In fact, that we ask that you try at different times of day, and it will give you different, it'll give us a good picture of what the internet reception is like where you live. If you don't get any internet, and we've had a few calls from people who know about it, but who don't get any internet, then we will take your name and phone number, and that will be passed on to, or name and address, I should say, that will be passed on to the people that are conducting the test so that that information can be included in the mapping. And we will create a map like this that we intend to actually be partnering with one of the universities to do a detailed mapping program this summer. So this is just one phase of what we've been doing, but it gives us a pretty good idea of where the need for internet is highest and where the areas that are already being well served.
Good, thanks, Rob. Rob, if I may ask you a question,
Yep.
Am I right? I'm getting a lot of surveys to do these days.
Yeah.
Yeah, and we're hearing about it, but strangely enough, it is a great way to get information. Although we do hear, oh, another survey, another
That's
survey.
right, that's right.
I know, but believe it or not, while people are complaining about doing so many surveys, they do the surveys.
Yeah.
So it's like term limits. Everybody likes term limits, but nobody wants to throw out the people that they've already elected. So
Never say nobody.
it's, but it is a great way for us to get at least some basic information. And we have a lot of strategies and things going on. We're getting near the end of them. The economic development strategy has already come out. transportation strategy is in the writing. The leisure activities plan is coming. Internet community sustainability or integrated community sustainability program, which I'm part of, is underway. We have 5 or 6 major ones that are coming that will all tie together. And but we need to know where the public is, and we get pretty good results from them. So yeah, it is just part of the communications program. We do a lot of in-person interviews with people and focus groups and that kind of thing too. Community champions meetings and that sort of thing to get ideas from people on what information they need and that kind of thing. So it is a lot, we realize, but it does work. So who am I to question it? I'm not a big survey person myself. I usually skirt around. If I see somebody with a clipboard in a store or something like that, I usually find a way around them.
Okay, all right. Anyone got anything else to contribute to the roundtable? I don't.
I have a question for Sabrina.
Go ahead.
Sabrina, can you suggest anyone with whom members of the board might consult regarding the budget issue that's going to be the subject of the special meeting in about 3 weeks, 2 weeks? We're talking about some professional.
What I could do is I can see if our finance department is available to offer their insight on this. Short of the board wanting to have somebody to come in and speak with us, we would have to then make decisions if the board wants to do that outside of the finance department.
Thank you.
Nothing else on the roundtable? I need someone to move that this board receives information, the various discussions we had on roundtable. A mover? Van and Lori, seconded. All in favor? That's carried. Key messages. You've read the key messages that Sabrina has suggested. Anything to add to that, Sabrina?
And Mr. Chair, I realized when I saw the roundtable that our last bullet there was the virtual town hall. And I recommended that we skip that and come back to it after we had the working groups report, and I neglected to do that. So if you would like to possibly pop back in and look at the piece of our agenda that we missed.
Oh, whereabouts is that? Oh.
It was on page 4, and it is F2 2.4. So it was action item C2.6, which is the virtual town hall. We were going to come back and make decisions on when the virtual town hall will be. That's important because tomorrow I'm actually placing an ad into the tax bill with the town, and we will be recommending people participate in our virtual town hall. This will be going out in August, so that would be for the fall date that we need to set today. And then the question is, do we want to have another virtual town hall in the next month that we can present the video and take any questions by community members? So we are making a presentation to council, like I said, on June 1st. That would be, I believe that's the Tuesday, so possibly doing a virtual town hall after that date. Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday. We're now meeting on the 3rd, so that might be a bit tight for people's time.
Do we have to?
We don't. I mean, we're putting out the year in review as a e-newsletter. As soon as the little bits of cleanup that we need to do are done, it'll probably go out next week. If we don't want to do a virtual town hall presenting the year in review, we don't need to do that. It would just be our spring year in review meeting. And if not, then we wait until the fall and we have that be sort of the kickoff of our strategic planning consultation process.
Well, I have a question for Laurie, who was predominant in both town hall meetings. Laurie, what do you think? Should we have another virtual town hall meeting in June sometime? What do you think? And of course, your opinion, Sabrina, as well, is welcome.
Well, we talked about it being for two possible purposes, and one was the year in review, and the other was to start telling people about the strat planning process. So will we be far enough along in any strat planning stuff to address that? I can't remember. I have a cat who suddenly decided he wants to hug.
We certainly could do it, just not in the spring. Maybe even if we waited until the end of June or early July. It would be a month after the annual report had been released, but you know, there's nothing wrong with picking a date that gives us the time to say this is the first portion of the meeting, and then the second portion is really looking at our strategic plan.
So we could do that and just delay it a little bit so we can get both elements in. I think that makes sense.
Sometime
So,
in July or August?
Is the board comfortable with the working group selecting a date and just providing notice to the board over email what the date will be? Or do you want to pick a date now?
Jesse?
Shouldn't the date be geared to when we think the most people will be involved in the town hall? And is that during the height of the summer?
People do we typically get, Sabrina? And how many live, but how many later?
Our live were low. Our live were about 10 to 15, which is about what you would get when you bring people into the gallery and do an information session. Our after views on YouTube were much higher. So we were getting 50 or 60 people who were watching it at their own time and their own pace.
So probably doesn't, Jesse, I don't think your concern would be too much of a concern because people can follow up and watch it whenever they like.
Right, we currently have
in theory, yes.
209 views. Right, we currently have 209 views, but in that first 2 weeks, we were about 50 people.
Does it make sense to mix the two? So if we talked about doing the year in review video as well as the strat planning. So a bit looking back, a bit looking forward.
I think that works.
Okay.
So is the board comfortable with the working committee picking a date that works for the committee to make the presentation and then just letting the board know? Or does the board wish to choose that today?
Mind my asking, you make reference to your working committee. Do you mean the working committee of the strat plan group?
Yes.
Yeah, I'd be in favor of that approach.
Okay, yeah, all right. So I think we can reach consensus on this. We don't need to vote on it, do we? No?
However you wish to proceed.
Consensus, let's just raise a hand and say we're good or we're bad or whatever, we want to go with it. What do you think? Rob says yes. Laurie says that's Laurie's thought. Gary's saying yes. I'll say yes as well. That'll make it a majority. Let's go with it.
Thank you.
Okay. Can I go on now, Sabrina? Key messages, where are we? Any additions or changes or whatever? Does anyone have any thoughts they want to get in there?
Me again.
Very welcome.
Obviously, the first one under budget needs to be adjusted. making the reference to assessment rate.
Yes.
Yeah.
And maybe it's just a reference to a meeting to discuss options.
Yeah, the various options. Yeah, yeah. I agree with Laurie that really, if we're going to mention it at all, or should we leave that out completely? Because this would be the 1st of June roughly that these words would go out.
They'll go out either tomorrow or Saturday.
Oh, then you don't want, I don't
They
think.
usually follow right within the weekend.
I think it would just add to confusion if we put it out now.
I agree. I agree with Rob.
Let's delete that organizational, that one in the 2022 budget, okay?
Yep.
Anything else?
Megan.
Oh, sorry, Laurie, obviously I can't see your hand, but go ahead. What were you going to say?
I just wondering under vibrant spaces, do we want to make a reference at this time to the story tower and start our communication plan around that, or are we getting ahead of council and shouldn't be dealing with it yet? Or this is a good time to say the board's discussed it, and for these reasons we support the proposal or the pending proposal.
I think we could make reference to it that we are in discussions with the town staff, and that a report will follow from the town staff to council.
Specifically on the story tower and
Yes.
the fact that you might throw in the raising the floor and lowering the roof, because those are the things that people are interested in. That and the water, of course. I mean, that's a negative, but raising the floor for obvious reasons. Lowering the roof are because of, well, common sense reasons, really. Yeah, it's a good point, Laurie.
Yeah, and then we also have that reference to the hub question really being about the east end, and that the Ellie Shore is considered the hub at this end.
Yes. Okay, I have those noted.
Anything else from anyone? Excuse me a second. I need someone to move that this board approve the release of the key messages as amended, I guess. Someone to move it? Rob, seconder? Dorothy? All in favor? Carried. Okay. Next date, next date is obviously June the 17th at 2 o'clock.
What about the closed meeting?
Oh, closed meeting.
June 3rd at 1 p.m.
Yeah, well, let's just make a note of that. That's all. It's June the 3rd. Yeah, June the 3rd at 1 o'clock. And as I mentioned, June the 17th, the regularly scheduled board meeting. It is now 7 minutes to 5 or whatever, and I declare this meeting adjourned.
Thank
It was a
you.
long meeting, wasn't it?
I think it was a very heavy agenda. It was well handled by you and the members and Sabrina pulling it together, but I think we covered an awful lot of ground today.